Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order. Eric Vink is unable to attend today, and so I'll be acting as vice chair. And do we have any comments from Blake before we ask for public comment?
Nope.
Right. And this is the opportunity for members of the public to address the NHA Advisory Committee regarding items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment? And this can be by commissioners as well as other public. Okay, and as a reminder, put yourself on mute so we don't hear background noises. All right, so we may, at the end of the meeting, we may have some items that the commissioners want to bring up that they're not taking advantage of this time, and we should be able to accommodate that today. Let me see, we have advisory committee member updates, and Blake, do you want to take the lead on this? So
I guess I'm muting myself too often here. In terms of the member updates,
yeah,
yeah, I guess we can. Do you want to just recognize anybody who wants to? I think we said that we would probably limit this to 10 minutes, and then if anyone wants to, you know, if anybody has anything in addition, we can say that to the end. Is that where you?
Yeah.
Where?
Right. So I don't see any hands up, but feel free to jump in if you have anything for committee member updates. Again, we can return to this because I believe we're feeling ambitious that we can finish our business today on time. Oh, I see James Montlow, your hand is up.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I just wanted to let everybody know on the 21st of this month, 2 Saturdays away, or 3 Saturdays, we're having our spring festival here in Locke. And so we encourage everybody who is around to come. It's a great day to spend here in Locke. There's a lot of stuff to do. And so there you go. That's it. That's my announcement.
Thanks for the announcement. And Matt Holmes?
Yeah, I just got out of a meeting where we confirmed that the Delta Stewardship Council will be hosting a public junket across the entire Delta. They'll start in Sacramento, doing some boat rides in Frank's Track, and then ending up in Stockton at the end of the day. I don't think there's room for everybody on the boats, but it is a public meeting. And you as Delta folks, I can share the agenda with you. If anybody's interested, let me know, or hunt the Delta Stewardship Council website. But it's a chance to work with the board to support science-based decision-making in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta.
Great. Anybody else who I can't see? And therefore, all right. Last call for updates. So the next agenda item is the National Heritage Advisory Mission and Vision Statements. And Augie is going to, from the Point Heritage Development Consulting, is going to discuss this. This is not meant to be worked over. This is just providing reminder of what we've done and where we've been, and that we will return to this at the end of our process to make sure it aligns with everything we've done in between the development of this and at the end. Augie, this is your item.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good to see everybody. We had several meetings, as you recall, between the management committee and then the advisory committee, and now back to you all, crafting a vision statement. Our mission statement is fairly consistent with the mission statement has been for the organization through the feasibility study. The vision statement, we've had a robust and energetic discussion on it, and a lot of good comments, which is encouraging, because a lot of times visions can create problems with organizations. But I have to say that you all were quite fun to work with on that. But I believe they were sent out in advance, but I'll read the mission statement. One just minor change that Eric and Blake have made, very minor, one word from what you've seen before, and that is the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area is a partnership coalition working together to recognize, enhance, and promote the area as an ecological, agricultural, and recreational, historical, and cultural treasure. So I erred when I said one word. There were two words that were added. Together and area were added to that mission statement. Again, except for that, consistent with what you've had as the mission statement that carried over from the feasibility study. Any questions on that?
I'm not in, Augie, I was wondering if we could post that. It's not intended to work it or to wordsmith it or anything, but sometimes it's easier for people to see it. And so if there are questions regarding the process or the direction, again, I just want to restate that we intend to visit this again at the end of the process because we may have some tweaks that we want to do at that time.
Good point, Elizabeth. In all planning processes, as you know, things are not done until they're printed, right? And even sometimes, as I have learned with heritage areas and good governance within organizations, you should always test your mission and vision statement after you've completed it, after a couple years of work. So, yeah.
Okay, so do we have any process questions? I don't see any hands.
Hopefully everybody can see the mission statement right now.
Yes, I can see.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, so this is in the bike rack, and then we'll come back and take a look at it again at the end.
Yep.
Last call for questions. All right, our next, oh, thanks, Blake. Why don't,
Sure.
I'll pause and let people read this.
Would you like me to read it too, or should I just remain quiet?
Oh gosh, why don't you read it?
Okay. You sound like my teacher back in grade school. That made
We
me
just want to
nervous.
hear your luxurious voice.
Oh, yeah, well, no
Isn't
one
it
pays any money to.
mellifluvius or something like that? Mellifluvius, isn't that a word for luxurious voice?
I don't know, but no one has said I had one before. And I don't think you might be saying it now either. So vision statement, as I said, quite an energetic and robust discussion about it. And again, I'll commend you all because this gets to what you see your region, not necessarily your organization, but your region being after all the work you do over the next 10 years as a National Heritage Area. So you're looking at the crystal ball and describing to somebody what the region is. And that is the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta National Heritage Area supports living links among past, present, and future, and among farm, developed, and natural lands, and the waterways in the Delta, Sucene Marsh, and the Carquinez Strait. This globally significant estuary has sustained a remarkable and diverse blend of natural and human communities over millennia. Through partnerships, the National Heritage Area affirms and protects our values as a living landscape, the appreciation of Delta cultures, relationships with water and landscapes, rewards of labor and commerce, and the revitalizing benefits of recreation, sharing these values with Californians and visitors from around the world.
Okay, again, are there any questions on the process? And again, we will take a look at this at the end of our work and make adjustments if necessary.
Any grammar experts on here?
Any what?
Grammar experts? I love it. I don't want to edit anything, but when we support living links, there's sort of a dative. So links are either to or between, living links among. It just read weird to me, some sort of guttural instinct. Links are usually directional or locative. Not at all worried about putting this out or even putting it in bronze, but it's easier to correct now.
Well, this is Dave Stewart. I was taught that if it's three, it's among. If it's two, it's between.
Correct.
But, so I don't know if that's right or not.
That is correct. And grammatical corrections will be considered, but sometimes the prosaic quality of the statement overrides that strict grammatical interpretation.
Satisfied. Thank you.
Yeah. And my reference for that is Zinser's book on the art of writing. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on. And our next agenda item is the Heritage Development and Tourism and Resource Stewardship Objectives, Strategies, and Roles. And Carolyn and Nancy will be leading this discussion, and it should be about half an hour. But again, we have time, so if we need more time, we can take more time.
Let's see, do I have share screen capabilities? I do. Let me find the correct one. Okay, can everybody see that? I don't know why it started at the bottom of the screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Okay, we're going to start with the Heritage Development and Tourism update on where we are with that. And then Nancy is going to talk about the resource stewardship. So I think most everyone is on one or both of these task groups. So you know that we've done a lot of work just in the last few months and have really accomplished a lot. So we're starting to see the management plan fill out, which is a great place to be. But just for those who may not have been able to participate in one of these, or if you're on Augie's committee for organization and haven't been in these, I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to review the foundations that we worked from. So you all know we had the public meetings last summer. We've been doing a lot of interviews, and then we've had a lot of conversation in the task groups, as well as this advisory committee, to begin thinking about, you know, what is it that this heritage area will do. So we started by looking at what are potential roles. That's generally one of the main questions that a heritage area has to answer in the management process is, what is our role? Because as we've talked about endlessly, it's all about partnerships. It's all about that network. So it may not be that the coordinating entity is the lead on everything. In some cases, maybe a partner or a specific task related to a project. In other cases, the coordinating entity may be the instigator of a project and the funder and the lead. So we had these 5 different areas, potential roles: organizing, implementing, technical assistance, funder, and promoter. And so as we thought about each potential strategy or action, we're also thinking about what the appropriate role of the heritage area is and who those other partners are. When we started looking at strategies and actions, what we did first was to draft some objectives, and then under that begin organizing the strategies and actions. And for that, we looked in tried to organize those again in specific categories to help us think through the process. And so we looked at categories of education, and that could be anything from school groups to visitors to residents, different ways to educate people about the importance of this heritage area. Advocacy, That's a lot of heritage areas are involved in advocating, working with partners in tourism, working in conservation, working in preservation, but advocating for specific actions that are of benefit and that are a part of the National Heritage Area's goals. The third area is promotion. And we had a lot of conversations about that. We're continuing to investigate what is an appropriate role in tourism promotion. As we've talked about, lots of heritage areas have some function, I'd say almost all of them, related to tourism. So is there a role there? The fourth area is what we call direct action, and that's your programs, your projects, the new things that you develop and manage and maintain. And then, of course, sort of undergirding all of it is the administrative function. And we looked at that in several cases, also understanding that as we flesh out these strategies and actions in these different categories, then that shifts over to the organizational development group.
Yeah,
to
Carolyn,
think
just
about.
take a pause, please, and then I'm going to have you repeat what you just said. Could everybody please go on mute? We're getting some feedback and we're also getting some other conversations. So Mike, can you put your phone on? Put your phone on mute. Thank you. And then Carolyn, just repeat the last sentence, please.
You're going to have to help me. I don't know where I stopped off.
Well, you don't just. What,
I think I was talking about administration. And
you were talking about administration.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. So that will transfer over to the other task group that focuses on organizational development. So if what we've talked about in these task groups is, gee, we're really going to need a staff person to do, X, then what is that going to mean in terms of budget and management and staffing? So those at this point are basically things that through these task groups we're flagging for further consideration. So I will just, what I thought I would do is just go through and share the objectives. We have several for each that came out of each of these task groups, share what those are. I'm not going to go through each action and strategy. But if you do see something as I'm going through this that you have a question about, I thought what we do is I'll go through this and then let Nancy talk about the resource stewardship, and then we'll have a conversation about both of those after we've both presented where we are with these two components. So the first objective under heritage development and tourism is promotion-related tourism promotions by the heritage area leaders and partners, attract visitors who come to enjoy all that the region has to offer and benefit the economy. So we've had a lot of conversations about how the area is currently promoted. We also know the Delta Protection Commission has already a leadership role with the Visit California Delta website, maps, and other promotions. So what the thoughts are really focused on what is the best role for the heritage area to build on that and bring partners together, develop a cohesive message and a marketing plan. And then thinking about the challenges of doing that, recognizing that the state tourism divides the area up very differently. And so we're reaching out to try to talk with those folks about, how the area is promoted in different ways, but how can it be promoted to recognize that this is the first national heritage area in California, and it is a unique area in its own right. So that comes under the promotion category. Lots of ideas for different kinds of promotions, for building on what's already there, the Visit California Delta, building that out. And you'll see we also flagged the interpretive plan. So all of the work that's been going on in developing themes and what are potential stories, how does that connect back to the places and the experience? So I think you know, as this moves forward into actually becoming a management plan, the goal would be to see these things intertwined, to see them making sense, meshing together. Administration-wise, we've talked about things like market research. There's some of that that's been done, but not on an ongoing basis of understanding who is coming and who potential partners are. The grant program has been talked about, I think, in every task group. Funding is always everybody's favorite topic. So thinking about that and other administrative activities. So that's the first objective. The second one focuses on what the tourism industry calls the product. And that is the there. What do people experience? Where did they go? What did they see? How do they find their way there? And so understanding what those products are is a key part. And then what the gaps are, what needs to be filled in or rounded out for the visitor experience. So under this objective of tourism products, making them easily accessible so people can find them and experience them. We talked about things like a wayfinding plan. We know the planning for the Great Delta Trail has just been done, and a great opportunity to coordinate there. Again, the thinking about making it easy for people who have lots of different interests, these thematic tours. Again, these, you know, connecting back to the interpretive themes. We talked about opportunities to tell the stories of Indigenous peoples, and I know that work is also going on in the interpretive planning. So again, how that connects. Connecting through water, the water-based recreation and travel, thinking about where people get information, how can they learn about the area, or their opportunities to have orientation, exhibits in different locations, and just again, helping people to get where they want to go, know what's there, and have a great experience when they come. So that's the second one. The third one focuses on increasing awareness education-wise for residents and visitors. So this kind of, in some ways, can connect back to promotion, but these ended up being more specific activities that are really education-related, things about safe boating safety, or letting boaters know about land experiences on the land. So things that are much more kind of a hybrid, I would say, of the product development and the promotion. We talked a lot about oral histories and know that some of that has happened and is already underway, particularly Clarksburg with the schoolhouse, but seeing that as an opportunity to not only engage residents, but to create a resource that can help with other development of tours or exhibits or events. And then collaboration, surveys to understand how people feel about, you know, where they live, what they need, how the heritage area can be involved. And then the last objective is the one that focuses on advocacy. And again, this is something that I think in all of our discussions, we came to the conclusion that there's a real need for that, specifically related to infrastructure. And so we started out talking about things that the state legislature in particular could have an impact or a role, and lots of, you know, inequities identified of cell phone connections, everything from the tech part of it to transportation, to, you know, all the things helping people with communication and access and getting from one place to the other. And then along with that, developing a regular process of messaging to not just the state legislature, but all elected officials to make sure they know that they're representing an area that is a national heritage area and how they can help that. Let's see, a couple of other things we talked about, the network of helping build a network of volunteers, looking at the possibility of an economic opportunity zone. Again, things like infrastructure, lodging, access, that kind of thing. And then we put at the very end, almost hesitantly, but just left it here for the future, because it's come up several times, is does the heritage area name need to be changed? And the task group just agreed, leave that, but let's put in capital letters that that's something to think about in the future. We've got a huge, a heavy lift in getting this management plan done. And so we don't need a huge distraction at this point about the name, but just kind of hold that for possible future. So that's where this particular task group is. And as I'll say, we've done a lot. As you can see, there's a lot of good, solid information here on possible strategies, actions, partners' role for the heritage area. But we do consider at this point, this is in the draft stage, and we'll continue to build on it and refine it. But I think this task group, congratulate this task group for a lot of hard work, a lot of meetings to get to this point. And so I think I will turn it over to Nancy to walk you through the resource stewardship task group's work, and then we'll have some time for conversation and questions.
Carolyn, as an alternative, maybe there are some questions that people have right now that we could entertain before we go to Nancy. So does anyone have a question maybe on the process or the future steps? Doug?
Hi. Okay. Yeah, I see that we were talking about the various objectives, and we are working with various partners like Tribal Commission, blah. And well, I think Locke Foundation should be put in there because number one, Locke was recognized as the most significant landmark of the Delta in the environmental justice survey. Number two, Locke Foundation not only represents Locke, but it also represents the anti-Chinese culture. So I think that we should explicitly put Locke Foundation there.
Well, thank you. We will do that. Good point.
Thanks, Doug. Anybody else? Question or suggestion? And if I don't see your hand, just start talking.
I would just suggest that the composition of formal partners be identified through a process, and that this, even though we're all dedicated to the Delta, I don't think we have sort of the wherewithal to decide, there may be people that identify with the Delta, and it's not for us to include them or exclude them without some sort of a process. But Doug's got to be in there. First one I would have nominated too.
Okay. So Carolyn, can you expand on the how to create a comprehensive list or have it a living list so we can keep adding to it?
Well, this is just what came out of this task group. So I'm sure there'll be lots of other partners who are identified. Nancy will be talking about, the resource stewardship. They were also identified of that, but generally with a management plan, you move into the organizational part and you focus more on partnerships. So there's several steps. This is by no means a comprehensive list of all partners or potential partners. So this is one step in that process that includes the other task groups, includes this committee, in the process, the interpretive planning, all of the museums, historical society, groups that are working with California State Parks and that part of the process. So this is not intended to be a comprehensive list of all partners.
Okay.
I don't see a problem with, sending this out and having, releasing this after the meeting and having people, submit additional partners for the actions as well. The only way we can get the information is through the methods we've been working on so far and will continue to work on, which are the public meetings, the interviews, the task groups, and all of y'all's input. And so I'm glad that I'm glad to hear both Matt and Douglas speak up for that. But I'm also gonna now say, okay, so what's missing? So we don't have to do that in the meeting, but this is the process. So by saying, are we gonna create a process to try to capture everybody? Well, this is the process.
Okay, so our homework assignment, as I understand from Nancy and Carolyn, is that we are to make suggestions for potential partners. And that would be very helpful. Mark? Yo, did he freeze? He's not on mute. I think he froze.
Oh, Elizabeth, while Mark is frozen, I guess. One of the things I did want to mention is that I will be posting this to the SharePoint site after we're finished with this meeting. Well, probably tomorrow, but at least by tomorrow. And so that will be an opportunity for people to directly interact with the file.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to have kind of a suggested format for, we know the obvious partners, the potential partners, and suggested partners, something like that. And then just say that this is the homework assignment and please submit. Matt, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I imagine the management plan goes out for public comment for a period.
It does.
And maybe that announcement and that open period can have a nomination form opportunity for people that review.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
When you say nomination form, what do you mean, Matt?
Well,
you mean a nomination for partners?
If somebody wants to join and be part of a partnership collaborative, they could self-nominate, or someone could say who they feel like is missing. And then it would be on the Protection Commission to contact that organization and give them an opportunity to participate.
I think this is an interesting discussion to have in the management and task group organization, or management and organizational task group, because some national heritage areas have kind of gone the direction that you you're saying, which is, if you're going to be a partner, it's a very formal process. Other national heritage areas have gone the direction of, if you're involved, you're a partner. So kind of making that decision, I think, is part of a next step discussion. I always have tended to be on the more, if you can find a way to hook into that larger tent of all the things that are going on, then you're a partner. But there are lots of ways to skin that cat.
Yeah, for sure.
That's such a horrible expression.
It really is. Maybe lots of ways
like
to.
cats.
Okay, Mark, are you unfrozen now?
Oh,
Mark.
just made, yeah.
Hopefully. Sorry, I'm out here. I'm out here in the Delta, so this is what we got.
Okay. Well, we can hear you. We can't see you.
Couple. You can't see me, or can?
You're frozen visually, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'll speak. So I find that in traveling to other similar areas, other what we call national heritage areas here, but have other names in other continents and countries, that the concept of patrimony is a real helpful concept. That's where you blend together a feeling of place, a sense of history, what's brought you to a moment, but in an engaging way that draws the person, the people, the communities, and beyond into what's a living landscape. I think what the consultants, Augie, would maybe call a living landscape, where the villages, the towns, the cities within the area more or less seamlessly work together, or at least so it appears from the outside. And they have these compacts. I'm thinking of France, they have 11-year agreements and so on. So I just say that by point of reference. Number two, I'm just going to get my front door here. Sorry. Number two is the 5 roles.
So Mark, you're breaking up.
In one or more of the categories. I can't go to a faster router. I'm sorry.
If you take yourself off video, it might help.
Chat.
Okay. I think we got the gist of your.
There we go. Is that better?
That's a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that suggestion. What is the path, if any, for UNESCO recognition for the Delta, and how the parallel question is how are what folks are doing on the tourism task group and in the advisory and DPC levels in a broader way, positioning us for possible acceptance or recognition as a UNESCO site, as an area.
Okay.
That has not been discussed at all. It
Okay.
could be included as a potential consideration for the future, but that's its own process. So right now we're really focused on getting the management plan done for the National Heritage Areas. So it could be included as a strategy for consideration. It's a huge undertaking though. So I would not recommend tackling that right now on top of trying to get a management plan done.
Okay.
Right, and I'm not making that recommendation, of course. And yes, you're right. It's a huge undertaking, and it's a big deal, et cetera, and so on. But that said, when certain foundational elements are put into place, if there is an eye toward the long term, an eye toward the bigger view at the same time, you don't want to inadvertently or unknowingly lay down obstacles in case future folks do want to go in that direction. So. Again, I'm not suggesting some sort of big effort here. I'm just suggesting if as an informational item, knowledge, if you have any, and it sounds like you don't, but we don't want to hurt that process inadvertently, so future generations don't have that option if they want to go there.
Okay, I think I can summarize that by saying that statement of keeping options open for potential UNESCO application. And that it's not the charge for this management plan, but it's just a window of opportunity. Is any other things, Mark? Is that?
No, sorry I was late. I had a business thing out of town, so thank you for letting me in late.
Sure. Anybody else with a clarifying question on what's been presented before we go to Nancy? I don't see any raised hands. I don't see a raised hand jump in.
Okay, I'll close this out so Nancy can.
Yeah, so Nancy, you're on.
I may not be on. Blake, can you throw me a screen share?
Sorry, I thought you were a co-host. No,
I apparently am not. It gives us all a chance to see each other.
Okay, now you're a co-host.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
That is okay. Now I gotta pull up the right document here. There, is that visible and comfortable for everybody? Okay.
I think so. I don't see any comments or hands? I
Okay.
like that size. That helps
Just
me.
a little bit bigger. There we go.
Okay.
All right. Well, Carolyn, I think described the process very well, and both committees, both the Heritage Development and Tourism Committee and the Resource Stewardship Committee went through the same process. And I pretty much want to echo everything she said about how much time the people involved in these committees took, and what great work and good discussions we had. We are truly in the portion of the planning process where you're really seeing, the making of the sausage. And as Matt was saying, there are more ingredients that need to go in at some points. We want to continue to add to this, but what you are seeing, and Blake asked me to just touch on this for a moment, but what you are seeing is what is going to become a major part of the framework for the management plan. The objectives that relate to resource stewardship, heritage tourism, and development get packaged into the larger 4 or 5 goals for the National Heritage Area overall. They will align with the mission and vision that we discussed previously, and the actions, the level that we're getting down to with the actions, become eventually an implementation plan where you've got what the heritage area is hoping to accomplish, what the role of the partners is, what the role of the coordinating entity is, and eventually how much it's going to cost. And so what you're seeing now is leading up to building out that framework, and these are very important parts. Blake, does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So resource stewardship is organized into 4 objectives as well. And the objectives really relate to the types of resources that are in the region. And so the first objective, it relates to the historic resources. The second objective relates to the natural resources. The third objective relates to culture and living traditions. And the fourth objective really elevates the role of Native American connection to the Delta. And so it pulled that up and tried to elevate it in addition to the cultural and living tradition objective. So we'll just kind of take a quick swing through these now. I'm going to get our faces out of the way so I can also read. So the first objective is that heritage area leaders and residents are more aware of the importance of preserving historic resources that contribute to the area's unique sense of place. So if you are thinking about heading for UNESCO designation at some point in time, World Heritage designation at some point in time, preserving the unique sense of place and the historic resources would be a key part of that. There is a lot that can be done for historic preservation. There's a good role to fill there. And so one of the very first things that came up was the possibility of creating a staff position that can help facilitate the connections, help people understand where the opportunities, the funding, and the technical assistance lie from or for historic preservation. The second thing is creating a grant program. As Carolyn said, grant program has come up a lot. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of individuals that are very active in many of the things that the National Heritage Area will be involved in. And sometimes the thing that is needed is funding, a little bit of seed funding. One of the things that will be important is working with the existing grant programs already. So there could be an opportunity to work, for example, with the Delta Conservancy so that people aren't at cross purposes, and instead you have kind of a building iterative process of you start with a smaller seed grant and then can move towards some of the larger capital project funding, some that is available through, for example, the Delta Conservancy. Elizabeth, we have a hand raised. Do you want to take questions now or should we go through? I'm going to give you the point of privilege on that.
Right, thanks. Deborah, this is a clarifying question. Do you want to ask a clarifying question now or do you want to wait?
I can ask it really quickly now. The section that this is under is more geared. Can you scroll so I can see the header for that goal, please?
Sure.
So this is under historic and unique sense of place. The items that you have in the boxes under there, are those limited to the historic portion of it versus, say, the ecosystem portion?
Yes, the ecosystem portion really falls under objective number 2.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I'm just looking at the coordination opportunities. Potentially some of those might be better placed under objective number 2, because like our Prop 1 program with the Delta Conservancy is very ecosystem focused. Same with that habitat restoration for WCB, those sorts of things. So it might be a bit of a shifting between the two.
Great. This is exactly the kind of stuff when this is your homework, when this comes out.
Yeah. Okay, great.
You guys can move stuff around. Sure.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So in addition to, actually, I will leave that so everybody can see that. In addition to providing grant funding, just being able to connect people to grants and sponsorships, acting as a clearinghouse for that is another important role. And then there were also some specific suggestions on the types of grants or how to connect to, for example, community-based organizations and environmental justice communities.
Okay, Nancy, I have another hand. Matt, is this a clarifying question?
Yeah, did I miss the part about who would be creating a staff position or a grant program? Is it assumed to be the DPC?
Aha.
Yeah,
Once
we
again,
haven't-
this is an iterative process. And so the ideas for how, for what needs to be done and who the potential partners are coming out of these committees, then the sausage goes to Augie's committee for management and organization to say, okay, do we need a staff position here and is it feasible to do? Does that answer your question?
And it's not sausage at that point either, Nancy.
Okay.
It's still the ingredients, right?
Yeah, thanks. I think
So-
leaving it wide open makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Matt, just
At this stage.
add to that, there's still a lot of questions that we have to answer, not only internally with DPC, but then with you all as we advance the recommendations for management.
Okay, any other clarifying questions? I got a thumbs up on the answer. That's awesome. Nancy?
All right. Let me see. I will scroll on down to some of the more educational aspects of preserving historic resources. There are a lot of tax programs and other incentives out there for preservation, and being able to connect individuals to that information that's sitting out there on a much higher level and much harder to get if that's not your field is a really important role. And same thing in providing training to educate residents and elected officials about preservation and its benefits. And then that really dealt more with buildings, but then also records, documents, and artifacts. So this is preserving historic resources, not just the properties, but also, you know, the museums, museum collections, archives, the things that help us tell the story. And then finally, advocacy is always an important part of preserving historic resources. And so again, the building of a network to advocate for historic preservation, and then supporting advocacy at the state level is something that's a niche that needs to be filled. Then finally, we're getting down in objective 1 to some of the direct actions, the projects and programs. And one of the interesting suggestions that came up was a development of a cultural character statement for the NHA region. This fits right in with management planning and really helps to define the things that are important and the things that make the Delta, essentially. And this has been done in some other areas of the state and was a very specific suggestion to come out of this group. Then also, oops, I should try to leave that up there for y'all, sorry. Cataloging the historic resources and landscapes in the Delta, and documenting historic resources and helping prepare National Register of Historic Places nominations, especially for the bridges. So.
And we have a raised hand. Virginia, is this a clarifying question or a clarifier?
It's informational related to the immediate previous item. Well, I guess both items that Nancy just mentioned. I think many of you are aware that we're working on the programmatic agreement for the Section 106 consultation with the Corps of Engineers. And as that part of that, we are developing a cultural landscape vision / document. So if anybody's interested and wants to know anything about that, we could put you on our email list for a little newsletter that has updates.
Okay, and you can put that in chat so people can respond to that.
Yes.
Or send us.
I will. Yep. Yeah. I will just put my address, and if people want to sign up, they.
Okay, thanks. All right, Nancy, sorry.
No, you're fine. Okay, you're going to see a lot more blank space in this one. Objective number 2, as I said, really is centered on the natural resources, the natural world. And so it's leaders and residents embrace a conservation stewardship ethic centered on the integrity of the rivers and estuary, habitat protection, and native biological diversity and productivity. And in our discussion with the task group, we realized that, and we've talked about this actually in the public meetings coming up to this, in some of the advisory committee meetings, there is so much going on in the Delta that deals with resource conservation, ecosystem restoration, all of these things that are dealing with the natural world. And so unlike historic preservation, where there is really a big gap to fill, this is much more going to lie with the partners, and the coordinating entity's role is going to be a little bit smaller and more targeted. And so we decided mutually as a group that the best thing to do would be to work directly with DPC staff to fill this portion out before we got comment from the public, that it would save a lot of guessing on everybody's part. And so we're still trying to catch up with Blake and the rest of the staff to make that happen. So as you can see, there are a lot of actions. Objective number 3 is focused on the culture and living traditions in the region. Residents and visitors appreciate and understand the heritage area's culture and living traditions. Again, this is an area like historic preservation and the preservation of historic resources that there's not as much current coordinated activity happening. And so while there's a lot of activity, helping coordinate things perhaps through a folklorist staff position, perhaps through reactivating some of the things that have been happening in the past, such as the Delta Farm and Winery Trail. The intergenerational, the facilitation of intergenerational knowledge of tribal histories and cultural traditions. And then also developing programs, exhibits, and events about the area's culture and living traditions. This is one of the, one of the key things that will happen with, I'm losing my train of thought here. One of the key things that the heritage area can help with, but a lot of this connects back over to the interpretive plan. So as Carolyn had noted earlier, there's kind of cross-pollination and interconnection with all of these activities. Again, documenting culture and living traditions around water and its connecting role in the area, supporting the development of tours and programs that are focused on the culinary tradition, food traditions. And I think actually it is some of the items that were under heritage tourism also really fit extremely well under this, which is helping connect the historical societies and cultural groups. Again, that convening role is going to be incredibly important. So, and then the fourth objective, as I said, really is kind of pulling out and elevating the role of Native American tribes and descendants of Native peoples with ties to the Delta, and their opportunity to understand and experience the significant and ancient cultural and natural resources in the region. So this objective deals with documentation, interpretation, right of access, how to pull all of that together and facilitate opportunities for resource stewardship, for access, for documenting the important resources and traditions, and for sharing that and with all of these, the tribes and the descendants of Native peoples are in the lead. And the coordinating entity's role is definitely going to be helping to convene and providing support. So Blake, you might want to say something about this as the tribal consultation process was moving forward with a different segment of planning yesterday, or do you want to kick that down to a little bit later point in the meeting?
Well, it's fair to say that we are sort of in the midst of doing tribal consultation, or I guess doing outreach for potential tribal consultation with different tribes that have connections to the Delta. And so we did have a meeting yesterday that sort of related specifically to the interpretive element of the plan. But one of the things that we see as very important is that, this is because, we recognize that tribes have a lot of obligations right now. And so there's a lot of work that they are kind of engaged in right now. And we figure that there's a possibility that we might have tribes who contact us after the management plan process is complete. So we consider this really a work in progress in terms of the ongoing consultation process with different tribes. We've been able to talk to some tribes yet, but we know that down the road there will be opportunities for other tribes to be involved.
Okay, I failed to note that, thanks for the presentation, Carolyn and Nancy. And I want to note that this is kind of a dress rehearsal for a presentation to the Delta Protection Commission. So I think you've heard Carolyn and Nancy say that this is an iterative process. And so this is a point in time that we're looking at this. And of course, we'll come back and add new ideas and correcting information as necessary. So rather than take that time today, because we really didn't program for that, are there clarifying questions for Nancy or Carolyn? And so I don't see any hands. Matt has his hand up. Matt?
Thanks. Back to the historic preservation. Blake, is the DPC considered a certified historic preservation organization?
Good question. Blake, you're on mute.
The host muted me.
Oh, instead of unmuting myself, I muted you. So sorry about that.
I can take a
Anyway, this is what happens when I have too many things going on at the same time, because I have several windows. One of the things in terms of that, that is really a more on the local level. Right. So counties and cities can become certified, but not on the state level. So, but we will. Yeah. But we will be working with the Office of Historic Preservation and other locally certified.
Yeah, just learning that certified local governments, not everybody's certified, and many are decertified, and that can really impact what's preserved.
Right. I know that we have probably very few governments, local governments within the NHA that are certified. So that will be something we'll have to bear in mind.
Yeah, tribes might be a solution to that. I mean, many of them are. And then my second question was about the scope of ecological restoration activities and the assumption that there's a lot of that going on. I've certainly seen money going out, but does DPC maintain like a record of, projects that different governments are implementing within the region?
I'm not quite sure. We don't. I'm wondering if there might be somebody else on the call who might have a better handle if maybe another agency that does that. I'm sure. Well, I have no doubt that probably at least the governor's office would have, or maybe the California Natural Resources Agency would have some tracking on the projects that are going on in the Delta.
I bet the Conservancy keeps a close eye on that kind of stuff, but you'd think there'd be a formal list for a designated region.
Yeah, we do keep an eye on them. Oh, sorry, this is Deborah with the Conservancy. So we do keep an eye on things, but we do not maintain a coordinated list. Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't recall if, as far as projects funded, I know that Natural Resources Agency does track ones that are bond funded, which is right now is the bulk of the work. Anything that's not bond funded, I know they keep track of opportunities, but I'm not certain that they keep track of actually awarded projects.
So I have a couple of suggestions. Most projects have to go through CEQA, even if it's just an initial study. And so that's in the records, and you can do a search for that. Keep in mind that some projects are subject to action by the Delta Stewardship, so they would have a list. So I'm not sure there's a single place that has the list, and for a variety of reasons. But that would be something that could be an ambition, but not something that we would want to entertain at this time. I think it would be fair to say. Doug, you have another clarifying question, please.
Sorry, I'm not sure it's relevant. I just graduated from the Delta Leadership Program, and one of the assignment is the America 250, the semi-quincentennial celebration for the country. So it's 4 years from now. I don't know how, whether we should tie in with the NHA. So just a point.
Okay, thanks. Any other clarifying questions? Again, this is just kind of like a dress rehearsal for the DPC, and we'll be back later on. All right, so our next item is the management plan resource inventory. And we have Katie, who's gonna work with Blake to get shared screen. And again, this is a resource inventory. This is for background resource inventory and why we have it. And then also for the whether or not we want to change the inventory that's in the feasibility study. Others can go into more detail on that. Those are my notes. And so basically we're looking for input that would be about categories, and to keep in mind, it's a work in progress. So do we have everybody set up? Katie?
So, yeah.
Katie? Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can
Okay.
see you and hear you. That's good.
Okay, great. And do you all see a spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, well, fabulous. Okay, so State Parks has been working on a resource inventory for the interpretive plan, and we expanded it to include other categories that would be helpful for the overall resource inventory. We took the a master list that the Delta Protection Commission had put together for this project, and we culled it down to the more we consider the significant interpretive resources, but also added a lot of different locations and partner organizations that would you know, have a potential for developing interpretive programs or you know, joint interpretive programs. So this list that you're seeing, and that is on a SharePoint site that Blake can you know, point you to, is a draft. This is our first iteration of this spreadsheet. We've got about 300 so some odd resources, and I'm just going to go through the categories and give you some ideas. So it's a sortable list. It's actually a table, so you can when you look at this, you can sort by any of these headers that you see up at the top. So
Katie, this
yes.
is Elizabeth. So on what you're showing on your screen, that we can't see all the categories running across, can't see all the.
Correct. I wanted to make it big enough so you could see at least, and I'm going to scroll over.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to go through the headers and give you some ideas of some of the resources. So you see here at the top of the screen, the resource name is either the organization or a site. It could be a bridge. It could be or you know, like a historical society, for example. And then we've got the, you know, resource type. Is it a building, structure, site? It could be just a historical marker. And then we've got the address, city, town, and then a basic description that was from the Office of Historic Preservation. I edited it down to make it more, just more general information. Okay. I'm going to scroll over here. This is a very long spreadsheet. You can actually print this on 11 by 17 paper and put the two together. I organized it so that that you can keep track of it when you print it. We also have the National Heritage listing status. So yes, if it's listed, no, it's not. We added the California Historical Landmark status, yes or no. Ownership status, federal, private, state, local. And then if we knew the organization or public entity who manages the property, we put that here too. So for example, you can see the National Park Service here. This category, interpretive resources, is one that is used for other heritage areas. Since we have it on the list, I consider all of these resources an interpretive resource, so I need a little more guidance on specifically what that means, and I could probably get that from Point Heritage. Area of significance, it's more like your word search. If you're doing a word search, your tags. And then here are all the themes. And I know it's probably hard to see because I needed a way to kind of condense the amount of room on here. So we have the theme topics up on top with the supporting themes. And then if the site would be a good location to interpret, this particular theme. So let me go back over here and I'll scroll slowly over. So we've got like the Martinez Adobe. It's a federal site, National Park Service. Here, I'll just highlight it. Manages it. Sorry. It's, make it a little bigger here. The main tags are a focus is agriculture, architecture, and you can see the other ones. And this is a really good location to talk about people's stories. And also the supporting theme of the gold rush. It's just like work in progress. And so I'm going to give you guys an assignment here afterwards, but I'll finish explaining the spreadsheet. So at the very end, from what I could find online, it's kind of hard to do all the research online because I'm only seeing what's available if the web page is updated. Also from the interpretive survey that went out and any other discussions we've had in our task groups, I put the current interpretation, which means interpretive program. So for example, this location is a recreation site, school programs, they offer online education, hiking for recreation, so that's specific recreation, and then also a really interesting documentary video. And then I added potential interpretive opportunities for partner programs. So this is where we're at right now. The nice thing about this is that it is a work in progress, and I'd like to entertain any questions about the spreadsheet, and then I will shift over to what I'd like to have your input on.
So Katie, why don't we take clarifying questions first, and then we'll come back and we'll get into comments on categories and anything of substance. So are there clarifying questions? Is there something about this that needs to be clarified? Trevor?
Thanks. And Katie, I appreciate your comments about how you see this interacting with the larger resource inventory. And I'm wondering, and I'm not sure if Katie, if this is you or maybe Blake, but I'm wondering, I see addresses here and sort of general locations. Is this something that's going to be geo-referenced at all? Will we eventually be able to see this pop up on a map, have this, GIS type database rather than just an Excel spreadsheet here?
Trevor, I can at least respond to that. I don't know if Katie wanted to say anything first though.
Oh, I think we could, I mean, I don't think it's in our project scope, but I can see using Esri software, you can create a story map with each of the locations where you can click on a location and it'll pop up with maybe the description or some more information on directions. So it's a good, I think it's a good, we've used that kind of mapping story maps on our state park projects. So it's a potential great use, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. It's a really good question. Any other clarifying questions? And then we'll come back for a discussion on the categories. Any more clarifying questions? I don't see any hands raised. Jump in if I don't see your hand raised. Okay, so categories. Do we have any comments, suggestions? Everybody's happy with the categories? silence means
I
that
guess,
everyone's happy.
sorry, I'll take your suggestion and just jump in. I'm wondering, Katie, again, to your point about categorization versus a way of tagging these resources. It seems like we're talking about two potential different approaches. And I think as as you're noting here, for instance, with the themes, a lot of the different resources are going to be applicable to a lot of different elements. And I guess I'm wondering if there might be, rather than just these sort of words here included in the area of significance, I'm wondering if there might be a more appropriate way to tag these different resources, not only for the interpretive opportunities here, but also, again, trying to figure out ways of how this is going to tie into the larger resource of you've got some here, for instance, that mention that there are recreational opportunities, hiking. I'm wondering if we can, rather than focus on categorization, focus on ways that we can tag these resources. So on, future on down the line, when we've talked a lot, for instance, in the heritage tourism group about how to give visitors access to these resources, we might be able to incorporate this into some sort of online database where visitors could pull up this resource inventory or a version of it that's more visitor friendly, and find what points of interest they might want to put together for a tour of their own.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think that can easily be added to this.
Okay, Lenora? You're on mute, Lenora. Good, okay.
You mentioned that, Katie, you mentioned that this would be posted on the SharePoint site.
Yes.
And that at that point, we would be able to print it out and add anything that we might think is useful.
Yes, and I'd be happy to go through what I'd like you to do in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, and just to, that is not available on the SharePoint site yet, but it will be in the next day at the latest.
So I have a clarifying question, Katie. Does this format match the feasibility study format? And generally, does it match what other management areas, heritage areas do?
I put this together based on what I thought the interpretive would be valuable for the interpretive resource inventory. So we did add the other categories, the headers that you see, to match the resource inventory that would be needed for the heritage area itself.
Well, Elizabeth, I can go into that a little bit more detail.
Okay, please.
Well, it's part of my presentation, so I can, if you don't mind waiting a second.
No, I don't. So you just want us to deal with the current categories, or you're inviting suggestions, Katie and Blake?
Are you ready for me to talk about what I need from this group?
Yes.
Okay, are there any more clarifying questions? Okay, I can't see people's hands, so I'll take that as a...
I don't have any hands.
All right, so this list was based off of, like I said, the master list that was put together for the heritage area. So it would include, I'm assuming, because I went through the feasibility study, so it's the resources on that. This is a work in progress, and when it gets posted to the SharePoint site that Blake will send you an invitation to, or at least point you to where it's located. What I'd like everybody to do, if they have a chance, especially if you are representing one of these organizations. So like, for example, if I go to Historical Society, you could do a search. You can do a search on words too, and it can get you right to it, which is nice. Except for when it goes to the wrong category. Anyway, let's say you're part of one of these organizations, the Bay Point Regional Shoreline. So I'd like you to go through and just check to see if I've gotten the right information in here. So make sure it's correct. And then take a look at the themes. And we took our best guess based on what we could find online and in other documents, what themes that could be best interpreted at the particular location. And go ahead and add, if you think, oh, actually there should, and I left the Native American experience open completely because we're going through consultation process right now. But go ahead and add, if you feel it's relevant, add an X. I'm going to go ahead and add, when we get it put into the SharePoint, I'm going to add a category for notes over here on the very right hand side, and you can feel free to add notes if it doesn't capture anything, if there's something else I need to add. So what I'm asking you to do is to look to see if your organization is represented, or if you have a location that you particularly feel is important. I went through all of our notes from various task group meetings and advisory commission, committee meetings, and believe I added everything that people had mentioned as good locations to interpret these themes. So let me know first if there's something missing, and you can add it at the end of the spreadsheet. So I'm going to go down to the end here. You can go ahead and just add it to the spreadsheet, and just fill in as much as you can if you have a new location.
Okay, I have another clarifying question. So you're going to send this out as our second homework assignment, but will this also go to others who aren't on the call today? Next, I would assume that's naturally. So I know that there are some people, particularly mindful of some folks in Benicia who aren't on the call today.
Yeah, so we are also in the process of meeting with various interpretive providers. So next Friday, I'm meeting with historical societies, Locke Foundation. And so I'm going to provide this to them, and just to make sure that their information is correct, or if they know of other organizations that we're missing. So yes.
And then another question I have is, I always feel that Vallejo is being neglected. So are you reaching out to their historical society?
I believe I have quite a few under Vallejo. We actually had quite a few. We had Vacaville. In Vallejo, yeah, here's a Vallejo, Mare Island.
Yes.
And that's another question we can do another time, but parts of Vallejo are not in the NHA, so I wasn't sure what the boundaries were for that. But we did capture, for example, here's Mare Island in the historic register.
Right. So so again, Belinda Smith, I thought she's going to be on the call today. She is more expert on this than I am. So I will contact her directly and have her make sure that this is inclusive.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this, I learned a tremendous amount during this research, but there are a lot of, I'm just going to go to Isleton for an example. So I'm sorry for scrolling. There are a lot of things that are listed in the historic registry as part of a historic district. And so you have a residence, for example, that you see here, that's in the historic district, and when it was the period of significance, and also that it's a private residence. But it could be something that a local historical society, for example, in Isleton, the museum could develop, if they haven't already, a walking tour, an audio tour, online tour, so I included those private residences as well, because they are significant. So it's a little bit difficult to know how to incorporate private residences, for example, in this story, but they are here too. So it's just something to make of note.
My second question is then on the indigenous sites that we have, for instance, on Glen Cove, that's a published indigenous sites, but what do we do when we have unpublished indigenous sites and there are reasons not to publish them, obviously, because they could be trashed. But we sort of, and how do we do that? So I guess that's what I'm confused, not sure about.
That's a really good question. And we did talk to a tribe yesterday and about that specific point. So, when we asked, what points of what locations would you want to interpret or tell, like creation stories, for example, like Mount Diablo is a focal point of a lot of local indigenous peoples, cultural landscape. And so he made a good point of saying he needs to go back to his tribal members and find out what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. So I think the answer to your question is, I think it would be okay to do published sites that are protected, and then leave it up to the tribe to add what they feel is important.
Okay, I have one chat clarification, and Trevor has his hand up. Trevor?
Thanks. I just wanted to check in, and maybe you mentioned this and I just wasn't following, but I'm wondering how we're handling in this inventory. And then I think I've had this question previously, but maybe this is a good time to bring it up again in the larger inventory, how we're handling sites that are outside the boundary of the NHA, but that have an important role to play in the NHA. So like one that I've brought up many times is San Francisco Maritime. They're obviously outside the NHA, but particularly for the interpretive survey, interpretive resource, I think they're really important. They have an important role to play in terms of telling the story, and they have a whole lot of resources related to the Delta and maritime history associated with it. And so I'm wondering that. And I also saw like Mare Island on there, but I know that was specifically excluded from the Delta. So I'm just wondering how we're handling those.
Ding, 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 ding. You want a prize. We added it. We added
Trevor.
We added some of the locations that were significant related to it, but we didn't add all of them. So like the Maritime Museum is added, Mare Island, Stockton, the Filipino National Historical Society Museum, because I couldn't find any other Filipino, specific resources. Anyway, go ahead, Blake.
Well, what I was going to say is that, we recognize that when we put together the management plan, that we'll need to print out a resource inventory that the National Park Service can review. But we also recognize that is a point in time, and that this is a work in progress. And so as a result, we anticipate probably having we do anticipate having categories and having resources that are not going to be included in the inventory that National Park Service sees, simply because they might be outside the boundaries, or it's perhaps as a category that we have limited information about. And so we don't necessarily want to print it out for all resources when we only have selected resources actually have that information for it. So we think that this is going to be a work in progress. And so, these things we will have, we're not going to keep it away in a private vault. This will be, at least a semi-public document that we'll be keeping, that will have information about, like I said, places that might be outside of the boundaries but are relevant, and other information that might not make it into the actual management plan.
Thanks, Blake. Before I call on David, I just want to bring up the sensitivity that Vallejo has about Mare Island, and it might be worthwhile to make sure that that there's a staff connection with, I don't know if it wants to be Katie, I can work with you on that. I have a long history with trying to include Mare Island on some resource management studies that and programs that we're doing with the state. I think they've overcome that hesitancy. Now they've more matured into its values. I'm just making a suggestion of sensitivity for that. There's less sensitivity with the Benicia, although it was very similar 15 years ago. So just a heads up for you on that. And David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before David talks, I'd like to ask if there's other locations on here that you feel might be sensitive, please flag them so that we know. Go ahead, David, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Blake, as the former director of the San Joaquin County Historical Society, I struggle with this because the museum is outside the boundaries, but the mission of the society is to interpret the history of the entire county, a great deal of which is within the Delta and within the boundaries. And so even though the museum is out of the boundaries, a lot of the exhibits specifically address things like Delta agriculture and indigenous populations and so on. There's even a Delta water path at the museum, and many of the programs and publications and so on certainly are applicable. So it's kind of a struggle for me to figure out. That's an example of many that fall into that same kind of situation.
Yeah, I would agree. That's, we do think of the museum as part of the Delta, even though it's not technically. And I think that those are the sort of resources that we want to keep. I suspect that we will probably keep that in the management plan inventory simply because, as you said, it is, even though it's outside the boundaries, it does interpret the story of the Delta. So I think it seems like something that's relevant for management plan, even though technically it's outside of the boundaries.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, David. Matt?
Yeah, thanks. David made one of my comments. I think they're like special places, no matter how far they are connected to the Delta. And another suggestion would be Mission Dolores in San Francisco. They reduced all of these populations into the mission there. Enrollees were overwhelmingly from the East Bay. So I don't know if that's in there. And then my next question was about the Vallejo Naval and Historic Site. Is that in here? Is that in the area, the boundary zone?
Yes, so that's on Mare Island. So you can go back to that listing for Mare Island. And that's one of the things that we might want to clarify, Matt, to make sure that there are specific sites on Mare Island that aren't controversial.
No, this is downtown.
Oh, the one downtown on Main Street. Got it. Okay. That's a good point. And I don't know the answer to that, but that's a.
Yeah, this is something this is just the historic, National Historic District. That this particular resource is talking about. But yeah, if we need to, add more, we can. This is the beauty of this list. And the San Joaquin Historical Society Museum is on there. And then I also have things like the Sistine Marsh area. So I have areas, and San Francisco Estuary, for example, is an area. So I do have things like that were suggested by everybody here, that I'm not quite sure, boundary wise, or who. It's a mixed ownership use. So, anything to help clarify about what is missing or what needs to be added would be great.
Yeah, I can help on the San Francisco. It's San Francisco Bay and Delta Estuary, and there is a clear delineation on that. with
Oh.
the San Francisco Estuary project.
Yeah, so that'd be a fantastic thing to add to this. I mean, more information. Sorry.
So is it helpful or hurtful to, like in Benicia's case, I'll just speak to Benicia, is that our historic museum is outside the boundaries, but I suspect I hope it's on this list because we've talked about it before. So is it helpful or not to indicate that currently not within the boundary? Does that?
Yeah, there's only a few on here that kind of meet that. We could flag those.
Okay. Okay. So when you send it out, you might want to do a reminder that there might be some things that are outside the boundary, but could be suggested.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out the best way for you, for everyone to provide information to me. I was thinking SharePoint might be the best, but I know SharePoint can be pretty cumbersome. We could also, and like this is up to you, but we can also send the list out to everybody. You can make your comments on the document and then just email it back to me, and then I can add the information to one document.
So if I had a teenager, I wouldn't mind doing the SharePoint approach, but I'm not a teenager, and so it's easier to work with Excel. Exactly.
So I think in this case, it might be easier for me to share this for Blake to just share the file, and then just send Blake or myself your comments on it in additions.
Okay, David, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I had another question. Just, Katie, maybe you can clarify, how about sites that don't have maybe physical resources, but where either had spiritual importance or where events happened? I'm assuming you'll probably get the spiritual sites from the indigenous tribes that you're working with, but I, for example, have done a lot of research on the historic massacres and raids and battles and stuff that related to colonial indigenous history. And should I, on some of the more significant ones of those, would that be good to add to the list?
Here's one, for example, that's actually a historic marker. It was a battle site that for General Vallejo and between General Vallejo and San Joaquin Valley Indians. So that's one of them that's on here. It talks about Mission San Jose.
Yeah, it's not in the right place, but that's okay.
This is actually from the historic, that's the other from the historic marker. So if you guys if you know your sites better than what was on the website.
Well, nobody knows exactly where that one happened, but
yeah,
but that's a very important one, and I figured that one would be on there.
But yeah, I mean, if I think we need to throw the spaghetti at the wall, as they say. So if you want to add the significant sites you feel is important, then we can go through it later and determine, come up with some reasons for keeping or not.
Okay, good. I will add a few, but that's the most important one, and I'm glad it's on there, obviously.
I didn't when we were talking yesterday to the tribe, Mount Diablo came up a few times, and I feel like that's just outside of the heritage area, but you can see it.
Yep.
And it's a very significant site, not just to indigenous peoples, but to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
So for a lot of different reasons, and so I'm thinking it should go on here.
Okay, are there any other suggestions? We have just a couple of minutes because we are approaching 5 o'clock. We want to leave plenty of time for member announcements that didn't have a chance to say anything at the beginning. So any other?
Oh, Elizabeth, I did want to mention that probably at our next meeting, I will go into a little bit more detail about the larger resource inventory. The inventory that Katie is talking about is more focused on interpretation. But we'll have an opportunity that probably at the next meeting to talk more about a larger resource inventory and sort of what the purpose of that will be as well.
Yeah, if you go to the second tab of this, which you'll get, there's 600 resources where I only have about 300 on the interpretive master. So it's more of like, because a lot of the stuff that's on the overall resource inventory originally was outside of the boundary, so I just took those out. So
Blake, can you give us an example for our next meeting, what you mean by going into the other items?
So, I'll just mention that the resource inventory, really the purpose of it is to identify those resources that might be important in terms of the operation of the National Heritage Area. And so those things don't necessarily need to be, they don't necessarily need to be interpreted, if that makes sense. There's things that might be more relevant to just the overall functioning, whether it comes to tourism or like it might be something that might be more related to tourism than it is to interpretation. So that's really what the purpose of the resource inventory is, that it's really meant to be a tool for future work in NHA and how we'll be able to do the work that we're doing going forward. So it will be a more comprehensive listing than isn't in the interpretive plan, but but I think as we go through this, it'll probably be a little easier to detect the differences between the two.
Okay, anything else? All right, I don't see any hands. So our last item are for member announcements. Before we adjourn, are there member announcements? Can raise your hand or just speak up. We usually have a couple. I have an announcement while you're collecting your thoughts. So you may recall that we had a Delta Trails project that was started a long time ago, and then it kind of evolved and morphed into something a little bit more comprehensive, and we've been looking at that. And as you recall, there was a planning group that was involved with that first effort, and then we also used them for a couple of our meetings, the consultants. The head of that planning group was Randy Anderson, and I think you heard reference to him. And unfortunately, he passed away recently, and that was one of the reasons the firm sort of dissolved. It was his firm that he had established, and the memorial service for him will be at the Benicia Community Park, or I should say Benicia City Park. And it starts at 11 o'clock, and there's a gazebo in the park. And I don't know how many people will show up, but he was very much liked in Benicia as just a fellow. And I think it's one of the sadder things that we've experienced recently. So I've invited anyone who wants to park in front of my house. I'm catty corner from the park, and it might be hard to park around the park. And so I will tell you that my address is 1215 West 2nd, and it's a long street. It goes up the hill, so there'll be plenty of parking if you just come to there. And I will be at my house and probably leave around 10:50 or something. It's a 5-minute walk over to the gazebo. And I just invite anybody who worked with Randy or knew his work to kind of come and celebrate his life. And as I said, it's really, he just did amazing work in the world of people access to open space and heritage areas. I see a hand from Jan Vick. She has an announcement.
You skipped an item 7. Are we not going to do that one?
Oh, thank you. I did skip that.
That was all.
So Carolyn, you didn't catch me on that.
Not internet. out and I had to switch to a hotspot and you all keep coming and going. So I'm not sure, I can't see anybody right now. So I hope you all can hear me.
Okay, well,
But just,
Nancy, Carolyn,
as far as
go ahead.
next steps, do you want me to talk about next steps?
Yes, please.
Number 7, okay. Well, next steps are the everybody's homework assignments. Will post the charts that we reviewed today. So if you have a chance to take a look at those and either give comments to us or make notes on those charts in the next couple of weeks, we'll keep an eye on those. We're also going to be in the process of looking at the online survey that we did recently, closing that out and assessing the responses we got for that. And we're continuing to do some additional outreach, talking to potential partners. So we'll continue working forward on that. And then I think sometime in the near future, Augie, you'll be looking at having a meeting of the organizational task group. And I think that's it. Nancy, anything else to add?
Nancy?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button, so I was shaking my head. No, I don't have anything else to add at this point in time. I just encourage you all to to do take a look at what we're sending out so that we can keep the process moving forward, both not only in meetings, but behind the scenes as well.
So to that,
I had one more thing to add, if that's okay.
yeah, Katie.
Okay, so I think I mentioned it, but we are meeting with interpreter providers and also with tribes as we can get time to meet with them. And so we are going to continue to update that spreadsheet, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to put on SharePoint, but it's okay. I think we have found a better process for that. But the other thing is that we are working on our interpretive goals and goals and objectives and action. So hopefully we'll have that ready to present sometime by the end of the month or June.
Okay, so you're gonna, I have 2 homework assignments, the potential partners. The sub-assignment of that is that we have somebody that's volunteered to do an application to UNESCO. I'm just kidding. And then their second homework assignment is the inventory, as we've discussed. And so on the homework assignments, can you be sure to indicate the date that you need? And then don't hesitate to nag people that you're waiting to hear from them and that there's a due date. Because everybody's busy and it's really helpful to be reminded. Jan, thank you for getting back to the agenda. Are there any other comments for the last agenda item, which is the member announcements? I thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Elizabeth, it's Mike Campbell. And I wanted to tell everyone that we lowered the schoolhouse onto the block walls yesterday, which is a giant step for us. So now it's securely on our site. And it was done, and you may know him, Elizabeth, Phil Joy from Benicia.
Oh, I definitely know Phil.
He's helped us over the past almost 4 years with moving, lowering, raising, and now lowering it onto the block walls. So it is it's safe and sound right now.
Did you take a video?
We have a video of when he moved it that I can send to you.
That would be good.
It's a aerial video.
Yeah, Phil Joy is sort of famous. He moved, I think you might have seen it on the news last year. He moved to Victorian in San Francisco. And it was a big deal because there are a lot of complications in moving buildings in San Francisco. Anyway, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else with an announcement? All right, hearing none, then thank you very much. And we will see you next meeting. Blake, did you want to cover the next meeting?
So the next meeting, I believe, is scheduled for June 2nd from 3 to 5 again. So that's a Thursday as well. We'll be getting back to you with an agenda for that soon. In terms of, I will be getting out to you more information from this meeting tomorrow. So just look for an email from me, at least hopefully, but maybe just one, but I might break it up into 2 emails that just sort of provide an opportunity for you to do some of the homework that you did in this, that we talked about in this meeting. So
Well,
I think that's it. For me.
Okay, I should extend a great thank you to staff and the consultants. It's really great work. I know it's really hard. You hear a lot of comments from us, but at the end of the day, it's really coming along beautifully, and it shows a lot of thought and a lot of effort. So I want to thank all of you very much. And with that, I will say we are adjourned.